Hi, Tony DeWitt here, Missouri appellate attorney and a guy who tries to make the law make sense on YouTube. I always tell you to try and find a way to do something nice for someone. So today, I'm going to tell you a story, a true story, about how I was able to do something nice for someone in the legal realm. I'll have more on that in just a moment down here at the beach. So it's probably not obvious to people who routinely pay their bills on time, but there is an entire industry that is directly related to getting money from people who don't pay their bills on time. And we talk about that industry in terms of three tiers. So let's start with MasterCard as one example. You run up $1,000 worth of charges on MasterCard, and all of a sudden you stop paying. What happens? Well, the first tier in debt collection is the nice fellow from MasterCard who says, we've turned your card off and we will turn it back on when you start making regular payments again, and I need to get a payment from you within the next 10 days. That's the first tier. That is the institutional collector. And in about probably 40 to 50% of the time, if people are not in a real financial pickle, they will figure out a way to get that card back on track and get back within the good graces of MasterCard. But that does not always happen. And so what happens when they don't get back into the good graces, they would rather have their institutional collector collect on those people who are eventually going to pay and continue to be customers. So they will farm out the debt to a third-party collection agency that will simply take a commission on what they recover. The person that they farm that debt out to is called a second-tier collector. And the second-tier collector works on a commission basis. Essentially, they get about somewhere between 20% and 30% of what the debt is. And they have a number of means at their disposal to do that. They can make continued phone calls. They can essentially reduce the debt in some way. Sometimes they're able to reduce it 20, 30, 40% and induce a settlement, get the debt paid off, and everybody's happy. Now, MasterCard's lost money, but they lost money the minute that person stopped paying and stopped being a customer. You know, in some respects, it's better for them to get some money as opposed to no money. If the second tier people are unsuccessful, and this often happens when someone moves. Someone will move, they'll get rid of their phone, they'll shut off their cell phone. People who are not able to pay their debts oftentimes use track phones and other pay by the month or pay by the minute plans. And as a result, they often do not have a stable phone number where they can be reached. And if they can't be reached, and if they can't be reached by mail, then usually your second tier debt collector is not able to get to them. In that situation, at the end of 6 months or 8 months or whatever it is, whatever the time frame is that the particular credit issuer has used, they will gather up all of their delinquent accounts and they will sell them to a third-party debt collector. Now, what this is an assignment. They essentially take the debt that has been incurred and they sell it as commercial paper. In other words, it would be very similar to having a contract to buy a car, and the contract to buy a car says you pay the bank, but then the bank can then sell that contract to anybody they want. That person that they sell the contract to is called a holder in due course. And the holder in due course can enforce the contract just as if they had been the original contracting party. Where this gets pretty interesting is when the third-party debt collector buys these debts, they might pay $100 for a $3,000 or $4,000 debt. They literally buy these debts for pennies on the dollar. When they buy these debts, they buy them, as I said, in one big giant bunch. And basically what they get from, in this case, MasterCard, is a giant printout of what the final bill is, how much they owe. What they don't usually get is a signed credit application, something that shows that this person contracted with MasterCard. And as a result, because they don't have that information, they simply cannot enforce the contract. But that's not how third-party debt collectors work. If you pay $100 for let's say a $1,000 debt, and you are able to collect $300 for that, you've made a $200 profit. In many respects, even though the debt is worth a lot more, they are often able to reduce that debt and collect it for a fraction of what the original debt was, simply because they didn't pay full price for that debt.
So let me see if I can clear this up a little bit with a diagram here. Your creditor, in this case, MasterCard, tries to collect the debt, isn't able to do that. So they go to a commission-based collector, and if the commission-based collector can't get any money for it, they'll send the debt back to the original issuer. And at that point, the creditor writes off the debt as uncollectible for tax purposes so that they can claim a loss. And then they sell the debt to a third-party collections company for pennies on the dollar. A $10,000 debt might go for $600. You never know. They try to hide the amount of money that they get, and they usually will not disclose that without a motion to compel filed in the circuit court, because they definitely don't want to alert everyone to how this scheme works. And part of the problem is that they do not have these debts all, separated out. They are bundled together, and they paid one lump sum price for all these debts. And the only indication of the value of the debt is the amount that the credit card company had on its billing statement. So, of course, that's the amount that they try to collect for, even though that's not anywhere near what they paid. So as you can imagine, nobody wants to reveal the man behind the curtain here, and so they try very hard, particularly if you go to court, to try to keep this information secret. And a lot of times that can even be the linchpin for getting them to dismiss the case. So these guys start out with phone calls. They'll call you and tell you that they're collecting for this debt, that you owe it, and they want you to pay it. There are a number of things that you can do at this point that are provided for under the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. I'm not going to go into those here, but there are a number of other videos out here on YouTube that talk about that. And for the purposes of this illustration, we're not dealing with somebody who's just a scofflaw and who, routinely rips off credit card companies. I'm talking about somebody who can't pay their bills, maybe because they've had a medical emergency, or they had a work injury and they're on workers' comp and they're not making any money. There are a lot of reasons why people can't pay their bills, and it's not always their fault. So if that doesn't work, they'll send emails, and they might send 3 or 4 emails a day. There are stories of some collection firms telling people that they're going to send the police out to arrest them, that they're going to send the sheriff out, that they're going to put them in jail. They make all kinds of threats trying to get this money collected, and it's generally designed to scare the heck out of somebody who's otherwise honest. In almost no case can they get you arrested, but the bottom line is that there are defenses to that are available through the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. But at the end of the day, the thing that they want you to get you to admit is that you owe the debt. And of course, all of their phone calls are recorded. So you should probably never talk to them on the telephone, or you should say, I'll happily talk to you, but only if you do it on a non-recorded line. There is almost never a situation where they will talk to you on a line that is not recorded, because frequently they are accused of violating the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, and they need to have some way of demonstrating that they are not doing that. So in many cases, they will just stop communicating with you if you tell them you won't talk on a recorded line. And they may bring threats, they may send you letters, but at the end of the day, the only thing you really have to worry about is a lawsuit. And if they file a lawsuit, that is a big red flag. It indicates you need to get a lawyer and contest it. Because here's the deal. You may have defenses you don't even know about. You may have a statute of limitations defense. You may have a holder in due course defense. You may have a number of contract defenses that, again, you may not even be aware of. So it is vital that you immediately go and contact a lawyer, because if you don't contest it, you don't show up in court on the day when this issue is called, or your lawyer doesn't, then they will get a default judgment, and whether their claim was valid or invalid, they will win. So you want to prevent that from happening. So back to the video and my discussion of how these things work.
They add in all of the collection costs that are allowed by law under the original contract. And again, the consumer has probably lost any copy of that contract that they had, and because many people apply online by sending back the document that they get in the mail that says, hey, we're happy for you to have a credit card here. And in fact, airlines will often send you these offers. I get them from Southwest Airlines all the time. They send you these offers and you sign the thing and send it back. Well, that essentially binds you to pay the credit card bill, as does every time you sign that receipt. But again, what most people don't realize is that MasterCard and whoever does not have a copy of that receipt that you signed at Kohl's, and they don't have a copy of that receipt that you signed at Target. They just don't have that, because even though the merchant keeps that to document that you indeed were the person that ran up the charge in the event that you dispute the charge, for the most part, nobody keeps those, and everything is done electronically. That's how Target gets paid. That's how Kohl's get paid. They send a request to the credit card company, and the credit card company takes 3, 4, 5% of that purchase and sends the amount of the purchase less that 4 or 5% back to Target or Kohl's. They're more than happy for the credit card company to take that 3, 4, 5% of the purchase, because they're getting their money immediately. It's a win-win for everybody. And of course, it's a win-win for the consumer, because they get immediate access and they pay for stuff, and it's very convenient until it's not convenient, and then you have a problem. But because of this, because of the way this system works, it is possible to get a credit card without ever signing an application. And because of that, there are a lot of fraudulent credit cards that are issued, and sometimes those are issued in the name of people who have no idea that a credit application has been filed in their name, which, by the way, you should check your credit frequently for that very reason. To get back to the original part of this story, from time to time, I worked for pro bono for a place called the Mid-Missouri Samaritan Center, which is located in Jefferson City. And the Mid-Missouri Samaritan Center was a great little organization that offered free legal help to people who couldn't afford to pay a lawyer. And I got a call for a lady who had gone through a divorce, and in the divorce, the debts were split up. She took her debts and she paid her debts off, and her ex-husband took out a credit card in both of their names and ran the bill up into the stratosphere. And because she was listed on the card, that's who they came after. MasterCard came after her, and she said, hey, I didn't sign this. I didn't run up these debts, and I'm not paying it. I think because they realized that there probably was a huge problem with that claim, and because she did have a divorce decree that showed she was not liable for anything but the debts that she was liable for, MasterCard didn't pursue it, but they did sell her debt to a third-party collector who came after her with a vengeance. Now, normally what these third-party collectors do is they wait 2 to 3 years, and they hold those debts until somebody is able to get on their feet again, they've got a good job again, they're making good money again, and then the debt collector lands on them and says, you're going to pay me $100 a month till you get this paid off. And a lot of times people don't understand the system and they wind up getting hosed as a result of that. So in this situation, when she received a lawsuit from this third-party collector, which was a notorious third-party collector, I'm not going to mention the name, but they do an awful lot of this kind of collection where they go after people who really don't have any liability. They will go after people after the statute of limitations has run. They'll do all kinds of crazy things that they really shouldn't do, but here is the secret. If they file a lawsuit against you and you don't answer that lawsuit and you don't contest that lawsuit, it doesn't matter if their original claim was not valid, because if you default on that lawsuit, then they have every right to collect every penny that they say you owe. So they had counted, I think, that this young lady would eventually not answer the lawsuit. But when the lawsuit came to me, I filed a long and detailed defense of the case. I filed an answer that said, it wasn't our dog, it didn't bite you, she didn't run up these claims, and it was basically just a classic answer to a lawsuit. The other party's attorney called me and said, we can send you the original contract. And I said, well, fine. Send me the original contract with her signature on it. And they never did that. And I think eventually the law firm that they had hired to work on this claim got tired of dealing with me, and they wound up dismissing the lawsuit. And I made them dismiss it with prejudice. And then I was able to go to this really nice lady and say, you're free and clear of this. They have dismissed the lawsuit with prejudice. They won't be coming after you anymore. And if this debt gets sold to anybody else and they buy it and they come after you, come back to the Samaritan Center and we will get this taken care of. And so far that has not happened. But it is important to realize that when someone sues you on a debt, they have obligations that they have to satisfy. They have to show, one, that you owe the debt, two, that they have your signature on a contract. Otherwise, they cannot prove that, this was you. And most importantly, they have to stay within the statute of limitations. Some states, the statute of limitations on a credit card debt may be as short as 5 years. In other cases, particularly, I think, South Dakota, it's 10 years. And of course, banks tend to set up credit operations tend to set up in states where they have the longest statute of limitations and the highest allowable interest rates. And for that reason, a lot of these cases are much more difficult to defend in that situation. But every case has a defense, and even if we cannot necessarily get you completely out of the debt, we can often reduce the amount of the debt and sometimes reduce the amount of legal fees that get tacked on. And if we can't get a complete win, we can at least get a partial win that way. So it is worthwhile to go see a lawyer about these kinds of things. And if you're just unable to pay anything, that's the time to go see a bankruptcy lawyer and buy your peace. So hopefully you found this interesting. If you have any questions about any of this, leave it in the comments down below. I will be more than happy to address those questions. So that leads me, again, full circle to the issue of kindness. The best payment I ever got for legal services was not in legal tender. It was in a woman coming to me and hugging me and saying, thank you so much, you have set me free. I can't think of any amount of money that would have made me feel that good that day. So think about that. Have a marvelous day. I hope you all had a wonderful Easter weekend, and I'll catch you down here at the beach next time.
If you like this video, here are a few others you might try, and don't forget to subscribe. Have a terrific day, guys.